This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper. Welcome to Ostracon, a podcast that translates fragments into the whole from which they came. Today we're reading The Hollow Men by T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot was born in 1888 in St. Louis, Missouri, and died in 1965 in London. And though he attended Harvard and Oxford, and though he ended up with a memorial in Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey, though he even became a British citizen and renounced his American citizenship, he nonetheless reflected in his life that growing up in St. Louis was one of the most formative experiences he had. He said, "It is self-evident that St. Louis affected me more deeply than any other environment has ever done. I feel that there is something in having passed one's childhood beside the big river, which is incommunicable to those people who have not. I consider myself fortunate to have been born here rather than in Boston, New York, or London." T.S. Eliot won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1948. You may have heard of some of his other works: The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, The Waste Land, Four Quartets, or Ash Wednesday. He's a towering figure both in relation to his creative output and the influence that he had as a literary critic, and I would encourage you to look into his other work in both of those areas. A memorial plaque in the church where he was buried reads from one of his own lines, "In my beginning is my end. In my end is my beginning." And on his memorial stone in Poets' Corner is his line, "The communication of the dead is tongued with fire beyond, the language of the living." So let's read The Hollow Men and then think about it together. The Hollow Men, a penny for the old guy. 1. We are the hollow men. We are the stuffed men. Leaning together, headpiece filled with straw. Alas! Our dried voices, when we whisper together, are quiet and meaningless as wind in dry grass, or rats' feet over broken glass in our dry cellar. Shape without form, shade without color, paralyzed force, gesture without motion. Those who have crossed with direct eyes to death's other kingdom remember us, if at all, not as lost, violent souls, but only as the hollow men, the stuffed men. 2. Eyes I dare not meet in dreams, in death's dream kingdom, these do not appear. There, the eyes are sunlight on a broken column. There is a tree swinging, and voices are in the winds singing, more distant and more solemn than a fading star. Let me be no nearer in death's dream kingdom. Let me also wear such deliberate disguises, rat's coat, crow skin, crossed staves in a field, behaving as the wind behaves, no nearer. Not that final meeting in the twilight kingdom. 3. This is the dead land. This is cactus land. Here the stone images are raised. Here they receive the supplication of a dead man's hand under the twinkle of a fading star. Is it like this in death's other kingdom, walking alone, at the hour when we are trembling with tenderness, lips that would kiss form prayers to broken stone? 4. The eyes are not here. There are no eyes here, in this valley of dying stars, in this hollow valley, this broken jaw of our lost kingdoms. In this last of meeting places we grope together and avoid speech gathered on this beach of the tumid river. Sightless, unless the eyes reappear as the perpetual star, multifoliate rose of death's twilight kingdom, the hope only of empty men. 5. Here we go round the prickly pear, prickly pear, prickly pear. Here we go round the prickly pear at 5 o'clock in the morning. Between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow. For thine is the kingdom. Between the conception and the creation, between the emotion and the response, falls the shadow. Life is very long. Between the desire and the spasm, between the potency and the existence, between the essence and the descent, falls the shadow. For thine is the kingdom. For thine is, life is. For thine is the. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper. So we have, at the most obvious level, this hollowness, this scarecrow-like quality, which is set out completely in the first section. But deeper than that, we have this relationship between eyes and stars, the distant stars, the fading stars, the eyes of various searching qualities, direct or indirect, and their motion towards unification. We have also, at the same deeper level, these diverse kingdoms of death and their motion towards unification and the end of the world. Let's start at the surface and work deeper section by section. So speaking of this emptiness, the line begins, "A penny for the old guy." This is a phrase that is said in England on Guy Fawkes Day. Guy Fawkes was a person who attempted a failed plot to blow up the Houses of Parliament. And on November 5th, his effigies are burned. The effigies are usually scarecrows or straw men, like the figures in the poem. And a penny for the old guy is something that a child would say to buy fireworks to add to the fires to burn the effigies. And what are these scarecrows? Eliot says, it's us. We are hollow. We are stuffed, leaning together, headpiece filled with straw. Dried voices, quiet and meaningless as wind in the dry grass. So, utterly empty, with nothing to say, no content, just sound. And he says this directly here, shape without form. In other words, something that takes a shape, but without intrinsic identity, no form, nothing made or meant by the shape, just an arrangement. Shade without color, paralyzed force, so something that might have power but is arrested, gesture without motion. In other words, movement without meaning, or motion without advancement. It is empty motion, accomplishing nothing. And this indictment of our hollowness says that we're remembered not as lost, violent souls, but only as hollow. In other words, not infamous for some particular quality of conduct, even bad conduct, but infamous simply for the lack of conduct, weakness, inactivity. This line, not as lost violent souls, but only as the hollow, reminds me of two things. It reminds me of the line from Revelations that you are neither hot nor cold, but lukewarm, and so I spew you out. It reminds me also of C.S. Lewis's The Abolition of Man, which, if you haven't read, I would recommend. Okay, so we get it. He's lamenting this hollow state. But now let's go deeper to the eyes and the stars and the kingdoms of death. So the eyes first appear in section 1, along with these various kingdoms, those who have crossed with direct eyes to death's other kingdom. Now, first of all, it's interesting that it is death's other kingdom, as if to suggest that this hollowness may also be a type of death. This inertness is, while living, a kingdom of death. But there is another kingdom of death, and some have crossed. And those who cross with direct eyes, as in not this indirectness or undirectedness, shape without form, paralyzed force, but those who have crossed with directness, remember us as this indictment, hollow. A great deal of the rest of the poem considers these different kingdoms of death and their consummation. Let's move to section 2. Here we return to the idea referred to as death's dream kingdom. In other words, something opposite of this waking time. And we see again the eyes are there. The eyes as in the ability to see clearly, perception of identity and situation. The eyes are there, but he dares not meet them. They are sunlight on a broken column, as in things are made clear in the light. Things are made clear to the eyes. And what is made clear is what has been broken. What is made clear is the loss that has been passed through. And maybe even the loss of false monuments. Also here are the stars. I mentioned earlier that as we look at the consummation of these different kingdoms, we also have these opposite eyes and stars moving to one another. The stars almost looking back. And here in death's dream kingdom, the wind is singing more distant and more solemn than a fading star. You see the fading star again in association with these hollow places, as though the star is the wish, the hope, the light in the night, but it is fading away with the hollowness. But in this dream kingdom, where he dares not find the eyes, he also says voices are in the wind singing more distant and more solemn than the fading star. As they sing, which is the opposite of this inert hollowness, they are further away, more solemn than a star, because they're not just a symbol, but they have content. They sing. They are the opposite of the hollow, who are shape without form, gesture without motion, who have no content, or as we'll even hear later as we move on, who grope together and avoid speech, avoid content. But here in section 2, as the speaker, in his recognized hollowness, encounters this other kingdom of death and fears the eyes there and the distant singing, he wishes to be untouched by it, uninfluenced. Let me be no nearer in death's dream kingdom. He does not wish it to change him. Let me wear deliberate disguises, crow skin crossed staves in a field, behaving as the wind behaves, no nearer. So he still prefers the nature of the scarecrow, no nearer than the wind, untransformed, not that final meeting in the twilight kingdom. Now, interestingly, here we get the word twilight because we have the other kingdom of the dream kingdom, a night kingdom, but then also is foreshadowed the final meeting in the twilight kingdom. Twilight, the time where day and night come together, a time where this death and the other death meet an inflection point, a fulcrum, perhaps the personal death of the individual speaker who is moving from a death of hollowness to the other kingdom beyond that he fears. We come to section 3, and again we meet a similar contrast. Here, where he lives, it is a dead land with cactuses and stone images. Think of the smashed pillar. The stone images are raised. In other words, they are not smashed, but raised, and they receive the supplication of a dead man's hand. So here, where the speaker contrasts the living place of this hollowness, the dead hands of the hollow, because he identifies the hollowness as a kingdom of death, supplicate these raised stone pillars, stone which is itself dead, unspeaking, almost like an idol that has no voice, no ears, and offers no help. Notice also that this supplication occurs under the twinkle of a fading star. Again, the distant hope that is pulling further and further away. And it's in that loss of what is beyond that the dead supplicate the silent stone. It is a contrast to the sunlight on the broken column that he sees in the other kingdom, where sunlight has illuminated loss, where false monuments are smashed. And in this comparison in section 3, he asks, is it like this in death's other kingdom? There is a curiosity for what he fears, and even a recognition of the integral desire that resides even in the hollow. At the hour when we are trembling with tenderness, lips that would kiss, residing within, perhaps paralyzed by this fear, is nonetheless a tenderness that causes the hollow to tremble. And it says, lips that would kiss. So perhaps if liberated from the hollowness, they would kiss. But what do they do in the state that they are? They form prayers to broken stone, an intermediate place from supplicating the raised stone images. When trembling with tenderness, the hollow can come to a desire to kiss that would form prayers to broken stone, maybe to a freedom from the idol, even a freedom from the hollowness. But inert as the speaker is, yet unwilling to go to the other kingdom that has the sunlight upon this brokenness. Now, section 4. We come again to the eyes and the stars, and they are moving together in anticipation of the kingdoms meeting, as the poem says, in twilight. The speaker begins, the eyes are not here. There are no eyes here in this valley of dying stars, in this hollow valley, this broken jaw of our lost kingdoms. The clarity, the perception is not here in the hollowness. The stars, the distant hope, are dying. In this last of meeting places, we grope together and avoid speech, avoid content. And I love this line, this broken jaw of our lost kingdoms. Like the fading star, the things that they may once have made before coming to this state are broken as a broken jaw, the place where we speak. Perhaps a recognition of the relationship between the hollowness and the loss, together contributing to a lack of content. But now comes this important move. Sightless, unless the eyes reappear as the perpetual star, that is, one that does not fade, multifoliate rose of death's twilight kingdom, the hope only of empty men. So here we have the consummation of the eyes and the stars. We've had on the one hand, throughout these sections, the eyes that are not here. The direct eyes have passed over. The eyes are in the light, in death's other kingdom, that the hollow dare not meet. There are no eyes here, as he said, because scarecrows have no eyes. And similarly, the plight of the hollow has been lived out beneath fading stars, dying stars, distant stars. But if they remain sightless in this distance, there is nothing but the farness of what is being lost and the effigy to be consumed, the time to be burned up like straw, a penny for the old guy. Vision, perception becomes possible when the eyes and the stars are brought together, when the concepts are identified, that the thing that is distant from us gives us some ability to see. And so it happens like this: sightless unless the eyes reappear as the perpetual star, perpetual, unending, not fading, not dying. If there is a perpetualness to the star, if the hope is not to be given up, then sight results. The eyes reappear as the perpetual star. The stuffed scarecrows remain sightless so long as the stars are fading and dying. But when the star is perpetual, then there is something to be seen. Perhaps most immediately, a perception of the hollowness. The scarecrows, eyeless, sightless, may not even know that they are hollow. Remember, the stone is supplicated by the hands of dead men. But when the star is perpetual and there are eyes, then the emptiness can be known. There's this term, multifoliate rose. Reminds me of Dali's rose. Multifoliate, a wonderful word, meaning having many leaves. So you can imagine a rose so thick with petals into which one can look, almost like the perpetual star in a multifoliate night, going through the twists and the turns, the alleys, the closes, the buried things, further and further on toward the perpetual, layer by layer. When there are eyes, when this reaching, gazing, feeling into the multifoliate begins, then there is an awareness of self. The speaker's own hollowness is known. Maybe this is the source of the poem, because it is a contact with something beyond the self that then allows the speaker to speak of what he is and maybe what he is meant for. And interestingly, at the end of the fourth section, there is a change in the description of the person from hollow to empty. And this is an important move, because something that is hollow is definitionally lacking in content, but something that is empty can be filled, can receive content. And so with the reappearance of the eyes, with the move from the distant and the dying to the perpetual, then comes the move from the hollow to the empty, something that is capable of reception. And this occurs in death's twilight kingdom. Again, the intersection of the day and the night, the crossing over, as the direct eyes cross over in the first section, as it moves from what the hollow speaker knows to the dream kingdom that he fears. At twilight, they come together, as the eyes and the stars come together. At consummation, where the nature, the identity of the person becomes known by its ending, becomes known by its destiny, that time cannot be wasted forever, that no one gets out of here alive, and something is to be done. In fact, you have this great line that says, "This is the hope only of the empty." While hollow, the speaker might not know that there is anything else. But while empty, seeing that he can be filled, then suddenly there is hope. Hope belongs to the speaker when, having now eyes, he perceives that he is empty. Thus, emptiness is not hopelessness, as hollowness might be. When hollow, the speaker is neither hot nor cold, just stuffed. But the perception of emptiness creates the possibility of being filled. The other and complementary reading of this great line, that it is the hope only of the empty, is that you can have a same problem of being overly full. The overly full may meet with the same directionlessness as the hollow. From their fullness, they might also fear the other kingdom. They might also lack any purpose but to be themselves full. In both cases, maybe all cases, it is the perception of the perpetual that then reveals emptiness. In other words, reveals a structure complementary to a great source that fills it. Now let's move to section 5, because all of this hope is conditional. At the end of 4, he says, sightless unless the eyes reappear as the perpetual star, multifoliate rose of death's twilight kingdom. But if the eyes do not reappear, then we have 5. There is no mulberry bush for the children to go round. There's only the prickly pear, the cactus, in the desert land where the speaker says they are. And everything is cleaved by shadow. Like the apocalyptic, I must spew you out. Between the idea and the reality, so what you might do and what you actually do, between the motion and the act, that is something without intent versus something that is actually done, falls the shadow. This is the shadow of inaction caused by hollowness. This is the shadow of the finality of time, where one cannot go back and now turn the idea to reality. The time has passed. Between conception and creation, a similar idea, emotion and response, doing something about what we know and find out, falls the shadow. Between desire and spasm, potency and existence, that is, even between the potential for life and its actualization, falls the shadow. And then this rich phrase, between the essence and the descent, which can take many reads. The essence of the hollow and their descent into the other kingdom, blocked by the shadow. The essence of the star as hopeful and its descent to the eyes and the sight here in the desert, perhaps blocked by the shadow. The essence of God and his descent among us, not for hollowness, but for the complete fulfillment of the human person and identity, blocked by the shadow. Perhaps the essence of Christ as Savior and the descent into hell. Perhaps this is the richest reading. For the sake of salvation, to draw all the lost back to himself, he goes to hell, to death's other kingdom, maybe, where the hollow fear, where the hollow do not want to meet the eyes, that they do not want to know. That final meeting in death's dream kingdom. Maybe they are hollow because they so greatly fear this other kingdom. But maybe they are also hollow because they will not look at the reality of this other kingdom. Maybe also hollow because they do not see that Christ has gone to that kingdom for them, and would not believe that the eyes there that they meet in death's dream kingdom, the sunlight on the broken column, the voices more distant and more solemn than a fading star, are indeed the eyes of Christ coming to retrieve them. Go back again to the duality of death's kingdoms, that there is the other kingdom that the hollow fear, but it is other because the hollowness is also a kingdom of death. The distant star, the eyes they fear, perhaps are Christ looking for them in the death of hollowness, that this is his descent into hell. But between that salvific essence and the descent falls the shadow. The shadow cleaves them off. The shadow, the sightlessness of the stuffed. And so you have these interjecting lines which are written in italics in the poem. Life is very long. This hollowness is a long wait, a long tedium, made long by its hollowness, its inertness, its fruitlessness. But also, you have the interjecting line, thine is the kingdom. Thine, capital T, as in God's kingdom, as in thy kingdom come from the Our Father. We've been talking all this time about death's kingdom. In fact, death's kingdoms, here and beyond. And the hollow attributes them only to death. But just as the shadow cleaves off the possibility from its realization in this section 5, so too do these lines, like desperate called out prayers, cleave apart section 5. They are right justified and in italics. For thine is the kingdom. Life is very long. For thine is the kingdom. As the shadow cleaves, so these desperate prayers cleave. The prayers, perhaps, of the no longer hollow but empty. As I say, we've been talking about death's kingdom, but whose kingdom is it actually here in 5? It's God's. It comes in time. It comes as a definitional end to this life that says, bear fruit while there is time to grow. Bear fruit because the winter will come and the garden will be cut down and growth will be stopped. A definitional end. A garden where the scarecrows might be growing if they weren't up on staves watching. But when cleaved off by the shadow of the eyeless, we come to this final end. For thine is, life is, for thine is the. You see, the words, the phrases that we're interjecting cannot be completed. They are lost. As those in the last of meeting places who grope together and avoid speech, gathered on this beach of the tumid river, that's the swollen river. Avoiding speech here in 5, even in the structure of the poem itself, the speech is broken. The lines are not completed. Too much has been lost. There is no more time. And so, this is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper. The end of identity is not the cataclysm against which one might stand for all their worth and thereby be not hollow. Rather, the end of identity is inertness, sightlessness, speechlessness, fruitlessness, until in a suspension of inaction, a suspension of fear, a suspension of comfort, the last sands of the hourglass slip away and there is nothing even to be said, just a whimper. Not enough content even to hate the loss. The Hollow Men was written in 1925, so at the time, Eliot may have been thinking of the lost post-World War I generation, some of which may have been stripped of direction or conviction as a result of loss and carnage. But it seems to me this is a poem that speaks anew to each generation and might speak to us of what is our own affliction. Are we equally hollow? Are we equally inert? Are we lost in a virtual world? Is it what has been diagnosed as an epidemic of isolation, our separation from one another, the loss of social institutions? If the glory of God is humanity fully alive, as St. Irenaeus said, if we are made for the high destiny of unity with a creator that is the source of life and beauty eternally, then it is easy to see how an enemy of God, an enemy of the human person, would want nothing more than for us to be lukewarm, stagnant, without struggle, without courage, without sacrifice, just passing the time. As Thoreau said, as if you could kill time without injuring eternity. Each generation can consider anew this poem's call to self-assessment. Let us find that we are not hollow, but made to be filled. Let us find that the stars are not distant, but are as close as our eyes and the way that we see ourselves and our identity. Let us not end with a whimper, but live. Cross with direct eyes out of the desert, for thine is the kingdom.